Today we're going to be working on this 01 Dodge Dakota. Basically, where the caliber bolts to the steering knuckle, the bolt holes are wallowed out so bad that it's just not feasible to fix it. So we're going to go ahead and change out the spindle, put new brakes on this thing, and hopefully be done with it. This truck, I've worked on it in the past. It is very, very rusty. So let's see if everything comes apart. Alright, so the next thing we're going to want to do is take out the two caliber bolts. Alright, so I pulled the two caliber bolts out, then I zip tied it up so it's not dingling by the hose. Let's see if I can get you guys to look at this. Ow. That's bad anyway, so I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but this hole right here is completely, almost completely through the outside of the metal there. So we could try doing something with that, but it's just not worth our time, so we're going to go ahead and change it out. So our next step that we're going to do is take off our tie rod. To get the tie rod out, you just want to strike the knuckle right here with a hammer. Alright, then go ahead and put your nut back on it so you're not searching for it later. So the next step is to pull out your collar pin. Then you can remove that. Alright, so we're going to buzz out this axle socket. It's a 32mm. After you pull the nut off, you got to get in here and get this washer off. I like to thread that on, a couple threads, then give this a couple taps just to make sure that axle's broke loose out of the wheel bearing. The next thing we're going to do is buzz off the upper ball joint. I have the jack supporting the lower control arm. Alright, so now we can buzz off these top ball joint bolts. Alright, so the last thing I'm going to do is pull out the cotter key, which I've already done, and pull out this lower ball joint. Now I already had this off, and then I realized that I didn't record it, so I just stuck it back on there. As you can see, it came right off. Chances are you're going to have to smack down on the spindle to jar it loose from the ball joint, or you can use a pickle fork, but either way, that's off. Now we can put our new one on. As you can see, our tie rod end is just completely shot, so I'm gonna have to replace that as well. So he bought a junkyard spindle, and I thought it came with a wheel bearing, but I guess I was wrong. So we need to go ahead and peel off this wheel bearing to put onto the other spindle. Alright, so I got the wheel bearing back on the knuckle. Alright, so now we're just going to go ahead and throw this back on. I'll put castle nut back on. Alright. So the next step is to shove our axle back in the hole there. Then we're going to put in our upper ball joint bolts. Okay. Alright, now we just need to tighten up our bottom castle nut down there, and it is a 27 millimeter. So the next step is going to be putting our washer on the axle. Put our axle nut back on. Now I'm going to run it down with an impact, just like I did the other bolts. Don't hammer them tight, just get them snug, and go back over it with your torque wrench. Alright, so the next step is to put our tie rod on. But as you can see, this tie rod is junk. I'm going to go ahead and thread it on there a few threads so I can break it loose from the inner tie rod. And then I'm going to replace the tie rod. To replace the inner tie rod, you're going to break this jam nut loose here, which is going to allow you to spin the tie rod end off the inner tie rod end. So let me go ahead and get that broke loose. Alright, so you can use a wrench or a big crescent wrench or whatever. Just get the jam nut broke loose. And then you can take out your tie rod bolt or your tie rod nut, drop the tie rod down, and then you want to count how many threads you pull off of it. And generally what I do is I keep that jam nut pretty snug up against the tie rod, and if the other one's, you know, looks the same or measures out to be the same, then I'll just take it all the way to the jam nut. Either way, you should have your front end lined when you're done. Alright, so got the tie rod nut off. Now I'm going to spin it off the inner tie rod. So 1 turn, 2 turns, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So I got 17 turns. So I'll just write down 17, and then when I put my new one on, I'll spin it up to 17 threads. If it looks like the, you know, same overall length, and it should stop me right at my jam nut. Alright, so I went and got the tie rod in. It's just the cheap house brand one. It'll last longer than anything else on here. So I'm just gonna put it on there. Alright, so we got our 17 turns on there. The next thing we got to do is we're going to just stick this up through the spindle. Put that on. So let's tighten this up. Alright, so I tightened up our tie rod in nut and our jam nut, so tie rod's done. Next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and hit the rotor one more time with some brake clean, and then I'm gonna change out that caliper, and then we can get to bleeding the brakes, rotating the tires, and we can be done. So you just gotta, I made a mess on the floor here, but now I'm just moving that caliper back so I can get the new brake shoes on, so I can get it mounted. Alright, so anytime you do brakes, make sure that you're using some brake grease on the pins, not on the brakes, because these rotors are floating rotors, so they do slide back and forth. So if you don't grease these little pins, then it can make it almost like the rotor sticking. Burn your brakes up. So this is essential. You can get bigger things of it. Always forget to, and then find these little packs. So basically just put a little bit on there, rub it around with your finger, make sure it's good and greased up. Alright, so got the rotor back on. Just need to put our cotter key in here, and this job will be buttoned up. Alright guys, it's all done. You guys seen me finish up the caliper. So bled brakes, rotated the tires, started up, pumped brakes. You definitely want to do that anytime you do brake work. Make sure you got a good pedal. Pedal feels pretty good and firm. I'm gonna take it out for a little ride, and if everything's good, you can come pick it up.